Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series, exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. For this season, we are covering Pokemon. My name is Max Roberts, and I am joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
As Nathan Drake once said to his dead, forgotten brother, I'm a man of treasure, so I must find my treasures.
Oh, my goodness gracious. I'm surprised the end of the game didn't have a prompt, a 3-option prompt of which was your greatest treasure, the gym battles, the Team Star Raids, or the Titans. You didn't get a pick.
This is true. You should have been able to regale your own favorite adventure to your mother. Do you have a mother in this game? I can't even remember.
Yeah. She makes the sandwich at the beginning of the game that you get.
That's true. She makes the sandwich.
Motorcycle.
She's the first sandwich giver, and then that's it. That's all. That's the only time you see her. She gives you one sandwich that just turns out to be very important.
And speaking of treasure, our greatest treasure here at Chapter Select is our members. For just $20 a year, you can go get access to the entire back catalog of longer episodes, as well as bonus content for each season all the way back to season 3. For our Pokemon season, we've been doing some team picking videos and battles in each of our Pokemon games. We just recorded our Scarlet and Violet battle yesterday, actually, and it's been a lot of fun. So you can find out more by going to chapterselect.com/join.
In addition to our new membership options, we do have a guest on this episode of Chapter Select to talk about all things Scarlet and Violet with us. It's one of our old buddies from the games writing scene. Chris Compendio will be joining us to talk about the game. Before we introduce them, let's run through the basic information here about Scarlet and Violet itself. This is the most recent entry in the Pokemon series. It was developed once again by Game Freak. It released on Nintendo Switch. It came out on November 18th, 2022. The game director this time around was Shigeru Ohmori.
Same as Sword and Shield.
Yes. The producers were Akira Kanashi, Toyokazu Nonaka, Takanori Sowa, and Kenji Endo.
No Junichi Masuda as a producer this time.
That's true. And the music, quite extensive this time around. Junichi Masuda may not have been a producer on the game, but he sure made sure to come back and contribute to the soundtrack in some manner. In addition to Junichi Masuda, the composers behind the game included Minako Adachi, Go Ichinose, Hiromitsu Maeba, Teruo Tenaguchi, Hitomi Sato, and Toby Fox of Undertale and Deltarune fame. This game's Metacritic score has got to be one of the lowest, I would imagine. I think it is the lowest, actually, in the history of the core Pokemon series, because I remember that when this game released. It sits at a 72 out of 100 on Metacritic, and obviously a lot of that is because the way that this game launched was very dismal. The user score is also incredibly low when it comes to Scarlet and Violet here on Metacritic, so this game was not well received by any means. Definitely one of the low points in the series, just going off of aggregate scores. But again, that's not a huge shock because this game has a lot of performance issues. Beyond those performance issues, though, I think that we all believe the game has some larger problems that we're going to dive into that, and let's bring in our guest for the episode. Chris, hi. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. How have you been?
Thank you. I have been wonderful. It's cold, so I'm trying to keep warm, but luckily we have video games. Video games will always save us during these rough times.
They do, especially the new consoles generate so much heat. They probably keep you toasty,
yes.
too.
Yeah, they're basically space heaters.
They're as big as a space heater, that's for sure.
Everybody's been talking this year about how it's been a down, like myself included. I've been saying the same things, like, oh, this is a down year. There's not that much to play. And then still we get to the end of this year. We're recording this at the end of 2022 to really date this.
Mm-hmm.
And there is still so much that I have not played this year that I would like to dabble with or play. It's just, there's too much. it would require a full-time job of playing games to keep up with everything. I feel like even during the down
I
years.
do have a full-time job, and I can't even do that.
Same, except I would say that the playing part of the games gets shoved to my off hours most of the time. So it's
Exactly.
it's very hard. Anytime, Chris, you're probably in this same. You probably get the same sort of thing. Do people still come up to you and say, oh, you play video games for a living, when you explain what you do?
That must be so fun. Wow.
Because that's kind of how it is for me.
It's not.
I have found, I know this is a tangent away from Pokemon, and we'll bring it back in a second. I have found that the thing I tell people the most often when I explain my job is I just broadly say, oh yeah, I write about tech. I say tech rather than games, because games then gets into like a kind of what I was saying. They're like, oh wow, you play games all the time? It's like, no, I don't.
Oh, you must play a lot of Fortnite then.
Yeah, then it like opens up conversations like that I hate to have, and so I'm just like, I write about tech. That's just my very cop-out way of trying to explain what I do for a living. Anyway, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Let's talk about this video game. Chris, we'll start with you. All of our guests we bring on the show, since we're bringing everybody in at different points of the Pokemon series, we've been wanting to know what everybody's broad histories are with Pokemon as a franchise. Obviously, I think you are a major fan, because I think we talked about this before, but you have nearly a fully complete Pokédex, I believe, at the moment.
The Living Dex is what you would call it. I have one of each, or at least as of Gen 8. Or as of Arceus, I should say.
So you're working on it now with Scarlet and Violet. Yeah, just what's your broad history with the series, and then what are your broad impressions here of Scarlet and Violet?
Yeah, my first Pokemon game was Yellow on the Game Boy Color, and I've been kind of an avid follower of the series with a few lulls in there. Like I was not a big fan of Diamond and Pearl, so I kind of slowed down during that era. I missed out on Black and White, which I regret, because I ended up really liking Black and White when I visited those. And I did not like X and Y, so Sun and Moon was kind of like my return to the series. My then partner and I, I got Sun, they got Moon, and that kind of revitalized my interest in the series. And around Sword and Shield is when I got really obsessed with just collecting every one of these stupid pocket monsters. So now I'm kind of deep into it. I'm very opinionated on everything. But you can say I'm an expert on the field.
How do you go about doing the Living? Are you playing the old like Game Boy versions, or are you playing just the most recent remake of like a Let's Go, say for Yellow, Red, and Blue? Or are you playing every game and catching every Pokemon?
It was sort of an every game sort of thing, and if you recall, I guess starting with Gens 3 and 4, there was a lot of interconnectivity, so you can be transferring games up generations. So what I was literally doing was just getting all of my GBA era Pokemon all the way to like the Switch era, because you can do that. So it just kind of like became this monotonous chore, because if you recall, a lot of these transfer methodologies involve a mini game of some sort. And you can only do it with limited numbers of Pokemon, so I was just going to Pal Park all the time and doing this Poke Transfer, like, slingshot mini game repeatedly.
Oh my god, yeah. Yep.
Putting things on in the background while I'm just, like, doing this chore of mine, and I don't know how I had the patience to do it. I guess this is before I had a job. So, and also just being very dependent, this happened at, like, the tail end of me being in university. So I had a lot of classmates and peers and friends who I depended on for trading and stuff for the versions I did not have. So a lot of it was just me hounding my college friends through Facebook Messenger, be like, hey, when can you get me this Diancie or whatever? Like, because a lot of the mythicals are event exclusive, so I even had to go to Pokemon trades, like subreddits and whatnot, and just talk to random strangers and try to negotiate deals to get
like-
some of these things.
Like the Craigslist for Pokemon trades.
Yeah, exactly. And they have so many specific rules on how to frame all these requests and listings and whatnot, and it was just a lot to wrap my head around. But
Oh my gosh.
it took a while. By the time I kind of abandoned it when Sword and Shield came out. Oh, actually, I'm trying to remember the order of the timeline here, but I think I stopped around when the Sword and Shield DLC came out, and about a year ago, once my interests, I don't remember what rekindled it, but I got a little obsessive with finishing the Sword and Shield Living Dex, so I remember I did a PowerPoint party with my local friends, and mine was called Pokemon Homeward Bound, and I just I photoshopped the Homeward Bound poster and I added the Pokemon Home logo on it because I'm hilarious.
I love it.
But I basically told this whole story that I'm telling you right now in PowerPoint form, and people were so taken aback by this that they Venmo'd me so I can buy the Sword and Shield DLC and complete this mission, which I did about a month after that. So, and then they announced Scarlet and Violet. It's like, oh, God, making me do this again. Come on.
And Arceus.
Yeah, Arceus was that was a whole thing. Actually, so there's this one mythical from Sword and Shield that I did not have, and I made a deal with someone who went to college with me. At the time, this person did not have Arceus. They said, "Oh, if you get me all of the Hisuian exclusives, then I will get you this Sword and Shield dude." So I did that.
Oh my gosh.
So you traded like dozens of Pokemon for one, essentially?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man.
And last I heard, this person just got Arceus anyway, so I did not need to do that. But you know what? It was all for the love of the sport, the thrill of the hunt.
It's kind of classic. Like it's funny that you're still doing this because these are the kind of things I used to do when I was a kid, but it would be with like people in my neighborhood and stuff like that. So there is sort of like there's a through line element in the Pokemon series over the past 2 decades of people who have been doing things like this, and to hear from you that it's still continuing just in different ways now, utilizing subreddits and things like that rather than trying to go find the kid down the street who has Pokemon Ruby and you have Pokemon Sapphire and you're trying to trade the version exclusives between each other. It's funny that this is like continuing, but in a new age sort of way.
I miss the intimacy of like having like a link cable with, with a buddy or something like that. But, I'll take shady Craigslist subreddits also.
There's still one very distinct memory I have of me and one of my buddies when we were like 10 going to, I think, like Olive Garden. And we said the whole meal we were there with our parents, we had a link cable and one of us kept restarting the game. Basically, we would start over Ruby or Sapphire, get to the point where you get the first Pokemon, and then we would trade that Pokemon off to the other and then go restart the game. And we did it in such a way to where we each got all 3 of the starters and then traded them between us so we could each play through the game with all 3 of the starters on our team. And it took like an hour and a half or 2 hours to do that. But like that's like a very distinct memory I have of sitting in an Olive Garden eating breadsticks and doing this mundane task to make sure we could all get Torchic and Swampert or Mudkip and I don't know. So
when you're at Olive Garden, when you're here, you're a Pokemon trainer.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so let's talk Scarlet and Violet a bit more specifically. Chris, broad impressions of the game just overall before we start talking more specifically about everything. Obviously, we're recording this in late 2022, which means the game is still in a horrible state when it comes to its performance and stuff like that. So a lot of what we're saying here is probably going to be impacted by that. If by the time this posts, the game has drastically improved, then
it likely will have DLC announced by the time this is out.
That too. We're playing it in a very vanilla state with no DLC or anything like that as well. But yeah, what are your broad impressions of the game, Chris, and how do you think it stacks up against, I don't know, some of the more recent entries?
Bummed me out. that's kind of the TLDR of it. I have this crazy theory that I only like the Pokemon generations that are prime numbers. So my favorites are probably like 2, 3, 5, 7. But Scarlet and Violet it's a big come down from Arceus, which is a game I very much enjoyed, and I get the whole thing of like these are different games, they are made by different teams at the same time. They have very different artistic intentions, but trying to do this whole open world thing, I'm not sure if it was over ambition or stubbornness, but it feels like a game that's defined by a lot of padding and a lot of I have a review up now on GamePro.com, but basically I said that it all feels like it's held together by duct tape.
Yeah.
It's just not a fun world to navigate, because it's one of those you could do this in any order you want to sort of games,
but you really can't.
Not really. No, I love building my own logic and sequence for those kinds of games, and I felt like this game just kept presenting walls for me that I could not pass, or I had to like really really wring out a lot from my underleveled Pokemon just to try to break the sequence they wanted me to go through.
Yep.
It feels like Game Freak is, the wizard behind the curtain. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. You can go wherever you want, but not really. We're guiding you down this yellow brick road of sorts. And if you go off the path, you're in trouble. But don't worry about it.
Good luck, they say.
I'm glad to hear that you're not a huge fan of it, because coming into this, Max knew where I stood. I think this game is not very good either. And I think Max is kind of in lockstep with that broadly as well. So all three of us don't really care for the game all that much. Coming into this conversation, though, this podcast, I thought there have been some people who I've heard of who have said like, oh, this is like one of the most unique Pokemon games ever. This is pushing the series forward in a major way. And I'm like, really? I don't feel like it is in the slightest. Yeah, I don't know what. The only things that I think are interesting that this game does is things that have already kind of been established in previous Pokemon games. Just like seeing all the Pokemon readily out that you can catch at any point in time. But that's something that was beginning to get introduced in Sword and Shield, and then they expanded on that in Arceus, and now we're here. So like those things I like, just walking through a meadow and being like, oh, there's a Tauros. I don't have that. I'll go catch it. And you could just throw a Pokeball at it and start up the catching sequence or their battle sequence or whatever. Like I like that stuff. I like seeing what you are actually going after rather than relying on some strange RNG luck where you're like on Cerebi.net and you're like, there's a 5% chance if I walk through this grass. If
it's at night and it's raining.
Yeah. Like that stuff kind of drives me nuts when we've been going back to the older games, because there's like these very specific areas where you have to catch certain Pokemon. So I do like that aspect of Scarlet and Violet. Everything else, though, like this game's format is just horrible. And you are not allowed to go anywhere like the game tells you can, especially because this game hard locks you with the like the leveling system. Like every gym badge you get, it's like, oh cool, now Pokemon level 25 will listen to you, and now Pokemon level 30 will listen to you. Like it is a very slow ramp up, and I got to a point in the mid game where I had Pokemon that were in like the mid 40s, and I didn't have enough gym badges to correlate with that because I was running around and enjoying the open world and catching Pokemon and fighting trainers. So I was kind of playing the game in the way that I thought I was allowed to play it, which was to just go freely explore the world and train up naturally and not go to these artificial spots on the map that it's wanting me to go to. And then the game's like punishing me for that because I've got my Pokemon. Oh, it's loafing around. It's not listening to you. It's like, well, great. Okay, I ran around and explored the world and caught Pokemon. And now you're telling me that that's a bad thing that I wasn't supposed to do. So there's a lot of elements of this game that are at odds with one another. And I don't think it's horrible on the whole, but it feels it does not feel well thought out. And in turn, they threw out a lot of the formulaic Pokemon elements that I think have kind of kept the series. I've talked about this with Max, so Max would probably be more familiar with our conversations we had about this a couple years back. But like to me, like two of the most formulaic game series ever have always been Pokemon and Zelda. And Zelda, a couple of years, tossed out its whole formula with Breath of the Wild, but it did that to great effect, and that game was really popular and resonated with a lot of people and accolades and awards and all that stuff, and people like that. This game, I feel like, is trying to do the same thing where they're like, let's toss out the classic Pokemon formula. I mean, there's still gyms and Elite Fours and stuff like that, but the structure of the game and how it navigates you through the world, it's trying to completely upend, and it doesn't work in the same way. This game absolutely wants to be Pokey Breath of the Wild, and it is hindered for trying to be that.
And a lot of it is an illusion too. I mean, the metaphor that I think of is how every town in the previous games would have a Pokemart and maybe like in the more recent games like a clothing store.
Yeah.
And in this game they would separate the clothing store into like 5 different ones. Like here's the sunglasses store, here's the backpack store, and just to kind of give just trying to pad it out to make it seem like an expansive world with all of these towns, all of these NPCs, with all these buildings, and it just feels a little contrived in that sense, and it's frustrating.
I have a hard time. I know you haven't played it yet, Logan. I know Chris has, but Arceus or Arceus, in a year where they have 2 Pokemon games that are trying to do the open world Breath of the Wild, go where you want type thing, I think Arceus pulls it off way better. And I think in part being unbound to we're a mainline Pokemon game, let that game be more creative and more focused in what it is. It's all about primarily catching Pokemon and filling out that Pokédex. And this game is go find your treasure on one of these 3 paths, but we're not going to tell you exactly where to go, although we secretly have a golden path for you to follow. And when I realized that it mattered where I went as far as leveling goes, because the levels of the gyms or the team star raids and stuff mattered, I just looked up a guide and just followed the order that IGN recommended and did basically the golden path narratively that way, like it was a traditional Pokemon game. So I never found myself enticed to wander around all that much. I did in the mid game, again, following guides just to get the Pokemon I knew I wanted for my team. And then once I had them, it was all set. I was done. And I just beelined it to every town, gym, raid, and Titan as Game Freak wanted me to do. But I guess we're too afraid to truly just let us go wild and do whatever we want. So it's still bound to tradition because it is a mainline game with the illusion of being free and open. And it just, there's these invisible walls all over the place, and it's frustrating to run into them. And it's either pick one, either give us the traditional route or truly let us go wild. And I think that's kind of what hinders this game mostly on like the whole. There's a lot of other issues when you dig in.
I think the thing that I find confusing about the format, and I'm trying to think of what the potential drawbacks about what I'm going to suggest would be, but why couldn't they make it in such a way where the gyms that you go to are static with their levels? Like, for instance, no matter what first gym you go to in the game, let's say it's going to contain Pokemon between levels 15 and 20. And then the second gym you go to, regardless of what second gym you choose, it's then between 20 and 25 or whatever. And like, instead, what they have it is like the gyms are if you go to the gyms up north, they're going to have Pokemon that are level 50s or whatever, and you're clearly not supposed to go there and fight. But why shouldn't I be able to go up to those gyms and make that the first one that I want to face? And the game knows in turn, like, okay, he hasn't gotten any gym badges yet, so we'll naturally make the Pokemon that you're going to face in this gym lower levels. Like, those are the kind of things I wonder why they didn't do, because instead it does... Max was saying, like, there is a specific path they want you to follow with all of this, and that's also true with the Team Star raids as well. I would say the Titans are maybe the only thing that I'm kind of fine with having set like strengths or whatever, like certain Titans being stronger than others. I think I was okay with that for the most part. But yeah, otherwise I thought it was strange that the gyms, there were specific ones that you weren't supposed to go to, even though the game was telling you that you.
Why was there no level scaling? Is the basic.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's surprising it wasn't dynamic, because if you truly could go anywhere and do anything, why not just have the Pokemon in the surrounding area, wild Pokemon, and the ones you battle in the gyms and stuff just scale with you? The game knows what level you are. The game knows how many badges you have.
Yeah, that's what
you would think that would be doable, and it's like
too much work.
I'm sure it's difficult on some level. I don't know. I've never made a game before, but it just seems the logical approach for this style of gameplay.
And that's what I was saying. I was trying to think of like what the potential drawbacks of such a system would be, and I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I'm not a game designer, obviously, but I don't know what the issues would be if such a system like that was implemented, where it was dynamic scaling.
And there wasn't any narrative implication either, because each gym is isolated. They don't really refer to the other gyms when the Elite Four visit you at each gym after you beat it, or when Nimona shows up.
I was going to say, I think that is the only thing that is dynamic, is Nimona showing up, and her battles with you that she opts to have are based on the number of badges that you have rather than the gym you're actually at. Yeah, and the story stuff was all dynamic in that way, where you could go to any of them, and whatever the second Titan you visit is going to then be where Arven tells you he has a dog or whatever. Like,
very good
the story
dog.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes that led to some weird cutscene. Some weird cutscenes where, like, I don't know, you fight Nimona, and then after that you meet an Elite Four member with Nimona, and she acts like she didn't see you just now. It's just so strange.
I wanted to, before we get too much more into I think we've naturally been talking about some of the more larger gameplay systems and the gyms and things like that. I wanted to ask broadly about what you guys think about the world in this game too, and I don't think we'll have anything positive to say, but I guess largely this is the other problem with this game, is that it wants to be an open world game, and I have not seen such a poor open world in terms of design since like 2005. This reminded me of a PS2 game where it's just broad shapes are what comprise like, or what make up the cities. Like, I feel like, yeah, like there are old games that are 15 years old that I feel like do a better job of crafting worlds that look, I don't want to say realistic, because I'm not expecting this to look like I want to see a real Pokemon world or whatever, but there's so little detail, especially when you get higher up and you're like gliding over the world and you're seeing the surveying ground beneath you, and it's like, oh wow, these are just shapes that I'm gliding over essentially.
The topography is pretty uninspiring.
Yes, it is
nothing
truly
enticing.
bad. And they have like set locations, like, oh, here's a lake and here's a desert and stuff like that. And when you're in the midst of them actively, it's not that bad. But when you get some distance and you're looking down on, there's just very, very little detail within this world. And I don't know. I think what's interesting to me is, a lot of people write that off. I've seen a lot of people writing that sort of thing off as like, oh, well, the Switch isn't that powerful. It can't do that much, blah, blah. It's like, well, if you've seen like Breath of the Wild, which legitimately launched with the Switch, like, I don't know if Game Freak...
That was a Wii U game, for Pete's sake.
Yeah, I don't know if Game Freak is on like a time crunch to push these things out, which I am going to guess is absolutely part of it, because they do not delay core Pokemon games ever. Once they get into the marketing swing for these, they're going. It's gonna get out regardless. So I feel like Game Freak is absolutely on a time crunch, but I don't know. I think all of Pokemon is sort of caving in on itself with how they're. I don't know. I don't think. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think these problems are just Game Freak. Now, do I think Game Freak's a great developer? Not particularly right now, but I think there's a lot more at play other than just whoever's making this game and making these decisions.
We'll never know. We can't be a fly on the wall. We don't know. Like, there's so many different parties involved in just one Pokemon game, because it's not just Nintendo, it's the Pokemon Company. It's creatures, it's Game Freak.
This is still like the biggest media property on the planet, isn't it? Like, bar none.
Something like that, yeah.
So there are a lot of moving pieces and a lot of people getting their say in. It's kind of like we were talking about when we did our Fast and Furious season, Max. Like, the longer that series went on, the more clear it was that there's a lot of hands in the cookie jar, all of them trying to vie for different things at the same time. That kind of feels like how Pokemon's been going the past decade or so. There's just a lot of
cooks in the kitchen.
Yes, there's a lot of people trying to do a lot of different stuff here.
I don't think Pokemon has made the transition to 3D all that well in general. I remember X and Y. I didn't finish those games back in the day, but I remember X and Y not performing particularly well, and those being interesting. I never did Sun and Moon, and then you and I just did Sword and Shield, and it just feels like they got too big for their britches in a way. And it's not like Pokemon doesn't have the resources, financially speaking, to concentrate and fix this, but they kind of have this Assassin's Creed sort of problem, where Assassin's Creed was every year and it had such fatigue and design waned. And then Ubisoft took the time to take a couple years off and reinvent the series. Now, Pokemon, can they do this? They could, but they won't miss a year because they were used to this bottom line performance every November of getting a huge boost in sales. It's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the best selling Pokemon game ever. And it runs like garbage, and the world isn't interesting.
Yeah, why bother? Why bother stopping if they're gonna?
It just prints money,
selling off the shelves.
Yeah, this game is very clear to me that the people that are working on the franchise, though, do want to do different things, and they're probably just not afforded the time. Time is probably the big resource that the studio does not have, because they are trying to upend the formula and they're trying to do new things, and there are interesting nuggets of ideas within this game, but they just have not been fleshed out, and it feels so rushed.
They have separate teams within Game Freak, but
they do.
I feel like all the teams are pressed for time. It's not, I think they outsource to a degree Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, that was done.
That was done by a totally different studio. Whichever studio made Pokemon Home did BDSP, and they did it in Unity, I think, which is why home integration was just absolutely messed up for that thing. Like,
it's just so evident that they either need more time or they need to rein the design in more focused, because the last two games have been fairly large in scope, I would say, and not executed super well on said scope.
Mm-hmm. It's so strange what they've improved on and what they just kind of ignored. Like, for example, navigating around the world, it's so much easier to pick up an item and you just get a little pop-up instead of like getting the whole text box and having to hit A repeatedly. But then battles are just slow as hell.
Oh, like, my gosh.
They're painfully slow. It's like, why can we do all of this?
And I feel like the animations for the attacks and stuff are getting worse, which is so weird.
And I don't know how much of the Terra battle stuff you guys did, but oh my gosh, Terra transformations, the animation alone for that is like 10 seconds.
We had the same complaint with Sword and Shield, I believe, when it came to the Gigantamax stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so slow. It takes forever.
This is just me mashing A is like...
And it doesn't do anything to speed it up. It's just like... It's just getting some sort of frustration out, so you mash buttons the whole time.
And Arceus was so snappy. So quick to get in and out of fights. I just
Absolutely, yeah.
it
The
is, I
animations
feel-
did not waste my time.
Yeah.
I can just jump into a battle immediately. I don't need the pageantry of a wild whatever appeared and
I know
hearing
what this
whatever these
animal
idiot
is.
trainers have to say.
Let me fight it.
I wanted to ask you guys about, since this is a new generation as well, we get new Pokemon in this game. Chris can probably speak to this the best, but what did you think about the Dex this time around and the new Pokemon and the new evolved forms and the, I guess we can go, what's it called? The crystallization thing? What's it called?
Terastallized?
Terastallized.
Yeah. That's the new form thing. Let's just talk about the Pokemon for a second, because I have some strong opinions on this Dex and some of the new Pokemon that they've added. I don't think it's horrible top to bottom, but it's so, I don't know. I don't have any strong feelings about a lot of this Pokédex. Do you feel the same way, Chris?
I think they're fine. I think there are some fun ideas, like the whole Palmo evolution line of whenever it evolves, it's just like standing up with better posture each time.
Yeah.
Or having like Tandem Mouse, and they just I don't know, they breed in the Pokeball, so
they
just,
evolve
like,
off screen.
Yeah,
and then you
exactly.
Yeah.
There is some creative ideas, and not in like a you have to turn your 3DS upside down kind of way. Like I think they're actually genuinely creative, and I think the designs are just fine. Like I know that's been a point of contention with every new generation, going back to, I don't know, Generation 2 maybe. I think they're totally fine. My personal issue is that because I nicknamed every single Pokemon, I have no clue what any of them are called.
Same.
So I only know them from my ridiculous, like, illogical nicknames.
I don't even nickname them. I just can't keep it straight anymore. There's 1,000 of them. There's too many.
I like some of the variants. I think Clodsire is a friend. I would like a Clodsire plush to hug and hold all the time. I think some of those, not regional variants, but like the Wiglets and the, what's the tentacle one? The one that just has legs.
Yeah, the tentacle. I don't know.
Toedscruel.
Yeah, Toedscruel, I think is what it is.
Those things are creeps. I want them away from me. But I think they're fascinating ideas. So I guess like points for originality. I like how we've just gotten away from Generation 1 nostalgia and whatnot. I don't think much about the paradox or whatever you call them, the past and future versions of the Pokemon at the end. It's just like, cool, you made Delibird into metal. Like, whoop-de-doo. Like, I'm not sure.
And then they give them cool names on top of that. It's like Iron Tail, Thorn Master,
stuff like that.
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care much for that. And I deliberately try to have a party only consist of new Pokemon because I just really want to immerse myself and really take advantage of all the new stuff. As tempting it is to just have like a level 80 Garchomp and just stomp on everyone, I had to kind of resist that. So, and I found myself, because of the way everything, all the badges, whether they're the traditional gym badges or the Team Star stuff and the Titans, they're all scattered and they're all of a different type. I found myself switching between party Pokemon more than I usually do in these games. So I have like a main party of 6 and like a reserve party of 6, and just swap them out depending on what situation I'm in. And I think in terms of keeping me on my toes with type matchups, this game certainly did that more than previous ones did. So, hot take, I think the Pokemon designs are okay.
Max, what did you think about the new Pokemon this time around? I know a lot of the Pokemon that you've been experiencing have been new because you've not played all of these games, but
This is true.
But what do you think about the new additions this time around, some of the new forms, all that good stuff?
I tried for the first time in the games that we've played so far, because we've played some games before this one. I tried to have a team of Pokemon that were new to me. I'm a traditionalist and I guess just a a boring old man when it comes to Pokemon up to this point, where I get Pokemon I know and I'm comfortable with. So if, it's a form or something that I know from my past, I just pick that. So this time I tried to get new stuff. Primarily, like I got the Tinkaton and the Bellabolt, and I guess everyone gets the Motorcycle Dragon. So I got the new draft form. I got the Mega Man looking sword ghost. So that was fun. Once I caught the team that I picked from the get-go, I didn't really pursue anything else. But most of the Pokemon I saw running around on the world I had either seen before, or they were, I would say, boring. There's like a donkey everywhere that I see a lot of. Teacups. There's a mule. There's a mule or a donkey.
Mudbray, perhaps?
Yeah, it's the Clydesdale thing, or Mudsdale, or whatever it is.
There were a lot of those.
Yeah, that was a Sun and Moon original, yeah.
I grinded out a lot of teacups to get my Ghost Sword Boy. So there was that. That was fine. I think the most interesting new looking Pokemon were the Paradox ones. Just, at least in Violet, they're shiny metallic futuristic Pokemon. I can't speak to what the designs in Scarlet. I really didn't look at that.
Chris and I said we didn't care for those.
I think they're fine looking. I like robot, whatever. They're fun. So, but yeah, it's okay. I was surprised at the amount of 400. Kind of was, I guess 400's a fine number. Like I didn't have a whole, Dexit stance, I guess, when Sword and Shield came out.
Between this game, Arceus, Let's Go, Sword and Shield, and then Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, like they've got, I have to imagine most of the 1,000 Pokemon in the full national Dex are available across all of these games. So there's less of an incentive to put, 800 Pokemon into a single game or anything like that.
I feel like 800's a bit unruly too,
Yeah.
Different types running around.
How many were in Sword and Shield? I know I want to say it was like 500 to 600, but I could be wrong on that front.
This can be solved. I have the technology. I'm on Cerebi.net anyway already. But will it give me just a straight up number? No. Oh, bummer.
I will say, like, there's never been a time in Sword and Shield or even in Scarlet and Violet where I'm like, oh, I'm so sad that I can't play as this Pokemon right now. Like, I'm just kind of vibing with whatever they got for me.
It was 400 in Galar.
That being said, it is disappointing if I, having done this whole Living Dex project and gone on Pokemon Home, and most of them have like, the no sign next to it. Like they're just stuck there forever. I can't do anything with them. So we'll see what happens when they add support for this game to Home. But
yeah, I would love to see it when we can actually bring them all into one game, whatever that game may be, because there are people like Chris or other folks who have had Pokemon from the Game Boy Advance era that have actually carried them along for the past 15, 20 years. And they're just stuck in this digital bank that you pay, I don't know, $5 a year for or something that you can't even tap into. And so that is something I would like to see fixed. But this Pokédex itself, fine. I thought a lot of Pokemon only had kind of the 2 evolution problem. They didn't go into a third evolution. I was a bit bummed by that.
A lot of single, just non-evolution Pokemon in this Pokédex as well, which was fine. Like, I ended up getting a Dondozo this time because I thought that Pokemon was cool. And at first I was like, oh, I don't like that this doesn't evolve. And then the more I used it, I was like, okay, actually, this is fine. I think I haven't really spoken too much at length about it, but I think my one issue with the Pokédex this time around is that it feels very indexed into certain types.
It's Sword and Shield all over again, just different types.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a problem, I think, in the past couple of generations. But like with Sword and Shield, I want to say there was a lot of over-reliance on like poison in that Pokédex from what I remember. This time around, like Ghost is strangely very prominent with a lot of these new Pokemon. Ghost was a big one. And there was really not any decent, I want to say like electric types. There was no real new water types, which I found interesting, like wholly new water types. Obviously there's a lot of water types within the game, but completely new water types off the top of my head. There's like the Dondozo, the Dolphin, the Wug Trio, and then
duck.
the starter. Yeah, the starter duck, and that's about it, all I can think of. So like they were but then they add, I don't know, like I said, a ton of ghost types and even new forms. Like the Annihilape it's cool. I like that Primeape gets a new evolved form, but why is it go from a crazy boxing monkey to a ghost with crazy hair? It's like, okay, like sure, it looks really awesome, but why is it part ghost type? Those are the kind of things I really don't understand, and I feel like the reasoning in my head behind why this is started to become so prominent is because when they create new Pokemon in these dexes now, it feels like they are working backwards from the perspective of which kind of type matchups have we not done a lot of. Well, we haven't really done fire grass, or we haven't done, I don't know, ghost fighting, like
fighting bird.
Yeah, like what are things we haven't really combined with one another? And they put those types together, and then they go and make a Pokemon based off of that typing combination, which I guess is fine, but it feels like the Pokemon are less influenced by just, hey, I came up with this design for this pocket monster, I think we should put it in the game. And it's more like, well, here's my assignment was to create a fire grass type, and I came up with this jalapeno dual-headed I don't know, bipedal dinosaur looking plant thing. It's like, okay, sure, we'll put that in the game. And I don't even hate that Pokemon. I forget what it's called, but like it feels like
villain or something like that.
Yeah. I feel like they are working backwards now rather than just trying to put the design of the Pokemon first and then figure out, okay, well, what type would this be? What abilities would this have? And they're instead coming up with all the stats and the typing and the ability, and then they're creating the designs based off of that, which again is not a recipe for designing horrible Pokemon, but it just becomes very clear that with this dex in particular, that this dex is filled with so many type combos that we've never seen before. And it just feels like that's kind of the sole thing they're interested in doing at this point, is mashing up various Pokemon types that we have not seen in the past and trying to just knock out the full list of type clashes and that's about it. But what happens when they've done all of those? Like, then will they start getting more inventive again when it comes to like Gen 11? Like I don't know. Like, these are
new evolutions, new types.
Like there's even the one of the other new fish. I don't know if we mentioned the one that's got the spiky things on its back. The purple. It's purple and gray. And it's very fast. It looks like a barracuda.
The horrifying one that just chases you.
Yeah. That thing is a water type. It's like, okay, cool. And then it's all of a sudden psychic type as well. It's like, okay, sure, I guess. Like, I'm pretty sure it's part psychic as well. So it just, again, feels like they're throwing, what are types we've not done? Well, we don't have many water psychic types. Let's do that. Well, what does that look like? I don't know. It would make a barracuda and we'll make it a psychic type. Sure. So yeah, I don't know. That would be my main criticism. Overall, I don't think it's terrible. I do have to say, I need to put this on the record, and Max knows I've said this, and maybe we can all speak up with what our own personal favorites are. I think the starters in this game are largely fine. I do think the gyrating bird is one of the worst starters in the history of Pokemon. I loathe that thing. It is atrocious.
Leave my duck alone.
It is truly, truly horrible. I think the best is the cat. The magician cat is really cool. I really enjoyed using that. On my team, I decided I really wanted both the cat and the gator, and so I had a friend trade me a cat from his own game so that I could use both on my team. So I used both in my own playthrough, and I think the magician cat is my favorite. But I also really like Scala Ridge or whatever, but I don't understand why it's ghost type. It doesn't really, there's nothing in its kit that really screams ghost other than when it evolves. It's like, oh, would you like to learn Shadow Ball? It's like, okay, sure, I guess. And that's about it. So I think the starters overall are pretty weak, but I do like Meowscarada or whatever it's called.
I think the starting designs are really good. The apple dragon, duck with a hat, a cat with flowers, all great. But the final evolutions, I think, are pretty bad all around.
I think that's consistent throughout all of Pokemon, though, to be honest, to some degree. Like, most of the beginning starters tend to look pretty solid. I can't think of too many games where I've been, like, overly thrilled with what the final evolution is. Like,
I suppose. I mean, Gen 1 is iconic through and through. You can't really
Yeah, of course.
dunk on that. What is Gold and Silver?
like even like I would say like back to
Cyndaquil.
Gen 2, like I like Cyndaquil, but Typhlosion's horrible looking.
What? He's a big gator.
No, he's like Typhlosion's especially
Oh,
bad. in
Typhlosion's
Arceus.
the fire
yeah,
Cyndaquil thing. I always get those
I'm
mixed
talking
up.
for alligator.
For alligator is the gator.
I don't think
Yes.
Meganium's very good.
No.
I
Bailey.
mean, we don't need to go through all 9 gens by any means, but like I don't think the final forms of most starters end up being that amazing. Like, I don't know. Even like Sceptile, it's just like, oh, it grew a tail and it still looks the same, I guess, as Trico.
I'm starting to like have a hazy memory of the even like Gen 5, Gen 6 final starter evolutions. Like what was the fire one in Gen 6 in X and Y? That was like the
It's not the
dude
pig.
stick, right? No,
The pig
Was that
black and
that
white.
the fox?
yes,
No,
the
Fennekin.
fox.
Fennekin.
Black and white was the pig.
Yeah.
Right.
Tepig.
Right. See, it's all. I'm losing it. Just trying to think about it, but I will defend Dancing Duck. I think that thing should be voguing. I would love to see that. So
I chose the one I thought was the least hideous. Was kind of how that one ended up.
You have to admit that thing's hideous when it gets to its final form.
I
It is
like the
so
feathers.
gross looking.
It looks like a big duck.
did y'all look up the designs of the final evolutions before you played this game,
I did.
or did you let
I
yourself
didn't.
be surprised?
No, I looked it up. I had to.
Because I did miss the feeling of walking around being like, what the hell is that? I had to get that. And this game, for just by nature of having them in the overworld, definitely did that for me. So
I want to take the conversation. We've talked about a lot of gameplay things and open world things and kind of the structure of Scarlet and Violet at this point. I did want to, I mean, there's not a lot to touch on, but we should probably talk about the story and the characters to some degree and just how
Yes.
we felt like this one stacked up compared to a lot of the others. I did not like it. I don't like the having 3 different routes is fine, I guess. Like that idea on its own, I don't have a huge problem with, because that's kind of how all these Pokemon games are structured in the first place. There's the through line, become the champion, and then there's always another
evil team, and then
a new team, a villainous group, and then I guess the Titan thing was really the only wholly new thing that they threw in this time around, which kind of set the stage, which I would say that tied into eventually, there's usually like a small professor arc too, where the professor is involved in some way, and which I guess the Titan stuff ends up flowing into the legendary arc, which is the other third major arc of most Pokemon games. So in that sense, a lot of what's here is not unusual. I guess I don't know. I don't like the idea of this being a school and go find your treasure, and like the way that they package it.
we don't want to teach you.
Yeah. It's like, welcome to this massive school. Please go run off on your own. Goodbye.
I like when it pops up and says new classes are available. Go back.
I didn't do that.
No.
Yeah, exactly. The Pokemon schools were always the worst part of, or maybe not the worst part, but they always put schools in the other games, and he'd go in there and like read the chalkboard. It's like, did you know that fire beats grass? It's like, okay, thank you, school. Yeah, so yeah, the framing around the school was something that I didn't like at all. And then the characters as well. I don't know. I'll pass it to one of you guys. Do any of you had any strong feelings about any of the characters or their arcs? Or
It was hard to really have have a grasp on any of them because of the nature of. I mean, at least the way I played it, I just kept switching between storylines.
Yeah.
So it felt like their progression was at a snail's pace, and I didn't really get any sense of who they were or what they wanted until maybe the back halves of all of their stories. Like Arven with his poor old dog, and the team star stuff was,
it was truly bad.
I get it. I get what they were doing, but then they had this very slapdash way of trying to get us to sympathize with them with the same sepia filtered flashbacks that the champions in Breath of the Wild had.
Yes.
Like, I felt like they were trying to recreate that, and because I had no context, and then not to mention the lack of voice acting, I think hurt their characterization a little bit. But it just did not have the same effect, and it was like, okay, you're all Game Boy'd, I get it, I feel bad for you, but the Team Star plotline in particular had some really silly plot twists, and then like taking back the plot twists for another plot twist and stuff like that, and reusing a lot of tropes, like the whole headmaster being like disguising himself as a kid.
Yes.
Clive
was had very much, yeah. How do you do, fellow kids? Had the like they only did that with Sun and Moon when the professor is a professional wrestler in the background, and it's like very obvious. Like even the dialogue prompt is like, "Is that you?" And they're like, "Ah, no."
I would never.
So it felt, yeah. A lot of it was kind of a retread. I do like some of the ideas, like the whole idea of just raiding a base. I think is cool.
But that got so boring, like every single time.
Oh
Like,
my
hey,
God,
what if you
yes.
just killed 30 Pokemon? And then it's like, can we?
it's so
I would have
mindless.
rather fought like 10 Team Star members like sequentially rather than just aimlessly run around and be like attack. Like that was so
Auto-battler.
Yeah, that was so mindless. And they gave you 10 minutes to do those, and most of the time it took you 90 seconds to finish them. So strange.
Yeah, bizarre, but it was all worth it because I thought the music in the boss battle was kind of a baller. So
Yes, the Team Star boss fights were dope. I liked Arven's plot in particular mostly. I thought Arven was going to be the kind of villain you were going to be, really personally antagonist, I suppose, instead of Team Star on the whole. And then it turns out he just wants to help his old sad doggy with some magic herbs, which was nice. And then, that ties into the legendary motorcycle dragon, which then ties into the professor. So I actually thought Arven has kind of the best story flow of it all. I think voice acting
Arven's very much the core. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the voice acting would have helped a lot. I think it's funny when you are going down into the core, which takes far too long to like walk to the bottom. All of your friends are like talking about how they know you and bragging about your origin stories. It's like, guys, I went to school and we all left. So I think Penny's arc as well is fine. It's better than Nimona, who our friend told us is basically Goku, which totally enhanced my Nimona appreciation as well. It's like, it's just Goku. They're always happy and they're always fighting. So I enjoyed those three. I think the Elite Four is pretty meh, except for Larry.
Larry coming back and be like, dang it, I gotta do this again. I've been hired to be an Elite Four member and a gym
Rise
leader.
and grind.
Larry is by far the best gym leader.
He's the best character in the whole game.
Yes, Larry's great.
Yeah, one of the best in the series, I would argue. He's the most relatable character by far.
Most of the gym leaders, I appreciated that they were, I think, some of the most distinct gym leaders. Some of them are the most cringe gym leaders of all time.
They try to give them all like very distinct, like modern personas, I guess. Like I'm a streamer. I'm a hip hop ghost trainer. Like get up on stage and we'll rap and then we'll fight.
Oh my gosh, Rhyme is the worst. I couldn't stand Rhyme.
They each have very different like modern kind of personas or character aspects that you would expect from people in the real world to some degree. Larry's the depressed dude at a dead-end job, and
who was the dude who made you auction for ingredients or something?
I'm a chef and and addicted to auctions.
Yeah.
Here, win this auction for me and spend my money.
We didn't talk about it with the gyms either, but man, the tests that you had to do were always mind-numbingly dull. Push this giant seed around.
This olive or whatever, and put in the basket.
Yeah, I mean, they ranged completely. Like, some of them would be really strange, outlandish things like that leaned into gameplay mechanics, and then you've got, like Max kind of said, like, hey, if you give this guy his wallet back, that'll count as your gym test. It's like, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then you're off. It's like, what? It was so... And then there's the other one I think it was the psychic one, where it's like, let's do our ESP exercises, and you just have to press a corresponding button.
That's like a Pokemon Stadium minigame straight up.
God, what is like there's some that it was just so strange. Like, I couldn't get any... That was always the worst part of the game to me. It was just going into the gyms because I didn't know what it was going to ask me to do. And sometimes it was something as simple. Like, the one thing I do like about the rap battle one is that it was just as simple as fight people. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. And then the MC who's hosting it is like, the final person is me. Now you got to fight me. And it's like, okay, yeah, okay, sure. Like, so that one was just so straightforward in its setup and its execution that I appreciated it. And then others were truly horrible because they were just not engaging in the slightest.
Yeah.
So
the funniest one to me was the sledding or skiing one where you have to go downhill, and it's like, this is the hardest course ever. Like, only the gym leader can do this. And it's like,
yes,
15 seconds. Like,
yes,
going through checkpoints.
And it's so choppy too, because it's trying to give you speed, but the game can't handle it. It's running at 20 frames. It's just bad.
I did want to jump in and talk about, I don't know if you were done kind of talking about the story stuff, but I did want to take it back to Arven briefly and kind of his arc, because I think he has the best single arc in the game. I think Penny's is weak and is terrible, and I don't like that they call her Big Boss, because every time they did, I was like, Metal Gear Solid. They're like, Big Boss, you're here. And I'm like, no, stop calling her that. With Arven in particular, though, I think the thing that sucks the most about his arc is that they set it up pretty carefully over the course of the game that he's kind of been hurt, and he's got a tragic upbringing that is amplified by the fact that he has a tragically injured dog that he's trying to heal up. And I was expecting there to be some sort of culmination with his story arc once you got down into Area Zero, and the culmination of that arc was his mom is dead and he's been replaced by a robo-professor.
Dead parents are actually long deceased.
Yeah, and then you get back to the headmaster's office afterward, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry your mom's dead, Arven. He's like, it's okay. It's just kind of it's just kind of closure for stuff I was already expecting. It's like, wow, this is dark. There is really no resolution to any of this. You're
skipping over the part where he was like had love for an AI robot as it traveled through time.
Yeah, that too.
It's like, no, don't go. I love you.
Yeah. So his arc is just, it's very dark for a Pokemon game, and it's
your parents are dead.
Yeah, especially because, like I said, they set it up in such a way that you think there will be I guess the payoff with his arc is that his dog gets healed and then it can fight you again, and that's about it. And that's the only good thing that happens to him the whole game. Other than that, it's just, I had horrible upbringing. I was borderline abused. My mom is now dead and has been replaced by a robot. We had to send the robot with her consciousness back in time. It's like, what? And then people are just like, sorry about that, Arven. Sounds like a bummer. And he's like, yep.
All right, back to school, everyone.
Yeah, pretty much. Did you know you could go fight all the gyms again? Let's set up a tournament. So Arven, he's the only one with a compelling arc, and it doesn't even it doesn't even end in such a way that felt
severely
good.
Undercut. It felt very half-baked, like most of the things in this game.
Yeah, and I could go on a huge tangent about the Team Star stuff too. I think it's pretty terrible. I'll just say that in short. Probably
the thing they do with the hands and they make the stars.
Hasta la V-Star.
Yeah.
That's pretty sick. I'll give them that. But the whole bullying stuff, it reminded... I don't know what is up with Japanese developers lately and trying to lean into bullying storylines, but it was the same thing with Lost Judgment as well a couple of years ago. They're like, let's tell a story about bullying and the troubles of behind
Persona
bullying.
5.
Yeah, Persona 5 to some degree was sort of like that, except that was more abuse and evil stuff rather than just being bullied. But yes, something that is...
Japanese game devs have had a tough time. Rough childhoods.
They're trying to really lean into these bullying angles lately. I think one thing I want to mention, I think we just kind of mentioned it, or you did a moment ago, Chris, was the music in the game. I honestly did not like this soundtrack that much.
No.
I did not care for it. I thought Sword and Shield was better.
I have so many notes.
No, I agree with you.
I did not really care for the there was no standout track. I think the fact that the whole game was a seamless open world took some of this away from me, because in the past, what has stood out to me about the Pokemon games is like, there's a theme for the caves, there's a theme for the ice area, there's a theme for the forest, there's a theme for each city. And like, I know the music still changes in such a way, but it was harder to notice those transitions with the music because the whole open world was just seamless and I was sprinting around it at all times. And so it felt very... I kind of need those hard cuts between the areas to appreciate the soundtrack a little bit more, in my opinion. And so it didn't really stand out to me for that reason. Maybe if they just did subtle piano music like Breath of the Wild, then it would have resonated with me.
Right.
Pull a page out of Sonic Frontiers and just rip off the...
Hey man, Sonic Frontiers has a hardcore metal soundtrack for every boss fight.
Yeah, that soundtrack didn't do much for me this time around, even though it had Toby Fox on board.
Oh my gosh.
I think I did like the whole dynamic aspect of the open world music. I think a lot of the... Like, I mentioned that I really like the Team Star boss song, but that's like kind of an exception to my whole opinion on the soundtrack. I think it was hard to really place the... using the music as an example, the theme and the feeling of this whole region in the game. Like, when you think about the Sword and Shield gym battles and how they would be like crowd cheering as a part of the song at the end, like that felt very much in tune with the sports culture. And for some reason, the Scarlet and Violet gym theme, like when they terrestrialize, they do the same thing.
Yes.
With the crowd chanting. It's like, but that makes less sense in this context. Like, what is the deal with Paldea besides the fact that they are arguably more obsessed with sandwiches than Pokemon? You know, like, what is up with all the sandwich stuff in this game? Why is it's like a sandwich-based economy? Like,
the sandwich gives powers to legendary Pokemon, beefs your stats.
Right.
It's so
I don't know much
goofy.
about, you know, the real life region of like, you know, Spain and Portugal or whatever that they base Paldea on, but it was an easy parallel with Galar and I guess with Great Britain and the sports culture there. But I was like, okay, sandwiches. Hey, we're getting ingredients and herbs. Yeah. Sure. Eating that JPEG sandwich.
Oh my gosh, that... I hope they never change that. I hope that's never patched.
I think they've already been trying to.
No,
honestly.
I hope that's never changed. Those animations need to stay, because those are actually good. It's the rest of the game that needs work. Oh, I'm frankly surprised, Logan. I thought we were going to be united on how absolute fire the battle music in this game is. I have 13 songs I downloaded before we recorded. I wish I could talk about them and include them all, but oh my gosh, I think every battle theme in this game is incredible. The Terra Raid battle music, that's Toby Fox. I was like, no wonder this is so catchy. It's Toby Fox. I there were only like 2 areas I wrote down that I thought were actually good. I think East Province number 3 and North Province number 2 had some pretty great music. And I only wrote 1 town. And those names mean nothing, right? East Province number 3. Where is this?
Yeah.
It means absolutely nothing. But then Lavincia, the electric gym on the coast. I thought that had some pretty good music. But what you've got the Nimona theme, you've got the champion themes, the battle themes. I think all of those hit really great and just are catchy and stick with you. And then you have the Penny theme, where you finally are revealed that she is secretly Big Boss.
Whoa.
That music, oh my gosh. They didn't need to go this hard in Pokemon, but they went that hard in Pokemon. It's great. And then I think Area 0, like when you're descending and it's all piano and that
Toby
I thought
Fox.
was pretty.
Area
Toby
0
Fox.
was solid, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
so that's all good. But I think the battle music in this game, especially with the quantity of it, because there's trainers, Elite Fours, there's the gyms, there's the Terra, like there's so many different battle themes, and I think they all hit. It's bonkers.
Again, the music that's featured is not included. Like I said, it was more just a situation where it didn't stand out to me as much as
In the context of playing the game.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Sure.
exactly. Yeah. Like and I agree that a lot of the battle themes remain good. That's not surprising. It's Pokemon. Those are the themes that stood out to me the most because they were tied to specific moments, whether it be the Penny fight or the Team Star fight or the champion fight that you mentioned. Those are all great, I thought, as well. But yeah, it was more the music around just when you're running around the world and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I can't tell you East Area 2's theme off the top of my head or whatever, but I can recall the cave music from Sword and Shield immediately because it's so distinct in my mind. And I've only played that game once and I didn't play it that much, but I can still remember it because that music is so integral to those moments of the game that I can think of them immediately. Whereas this, it's just kind of like I'm running around all over the place. And so I guess the one other thing I want to talk about before we kind of wrap up here, and this is something we mentioned a bit, would just be the post game. How do you guys feel like the post game stacks up this time around? Max and I probably can't speak to this with too much depth. Max, I know you kind of just stopped playing as soon as you finished rolling credits. Same sort of thing for me. Honestly, I dabbled around for a little bit longer, but I did not really dive into the post game a lot. Chris, how did you feel like it stacked up this time around?
I feel a little directionless. I have not been impressed with the post game in any of these recent games. I think.
Yeah.
It always feels like they're saving it for the third version or for the DLC instead.
That's exactly what I feel like. Is they tucked away the stuff for the DLC that they're going to roll out over the next year, and then that'll be
exactly. Yeah. Like I love the Sword and Shield DLC, but I cannot recall what I did after I rolled credits in Sword and Shield. But have you found any of those stakes that are just driven into the ground?
I found only 2 or 3 of them. I don't know what they do or what they're tied to at all.
There is I can't find any lore or dialogue on this, so I'm just again I have to depend on online guides, I guess, because it just feels very last seconds thrown in there, or they just forgot to again half-baked, like they just forgot to complete that aspect of
it's weird that they throw those things in there and you interact with them and it's just like it disappeared, and it's like, well, what does that even mean? What am I supposed to do with that information?
Yeah, I know they have something to do with some new legendaries that you can catch in the post game, which I don't really have much knowledge on at this point. And I don't feel very compelled to fight the gym leaders again.
To me, the post game just reminded me of Sword and Shield without the narrative hook. Because in Sword and Shield, you have to go to each gym and fight a Gigantamax Pokemon, and then and then you fight Shield Bert and Sword Boy or whatever, the big wig rich foe. So there was a narrative push, at least in that post game. This post game is Go check on the gyms for me, please, and fight your fellow students.
Help me set up a tournament.
Yeah, so I feel like it's
fight
pretty
even more
aimless.
So I'm a child. Why is that my job?
Yes.
I'm a student. Please teach me biology rather than telling me to set up a nationwide Poke tournament.
Don't forget to go to class.
The last thing I wanted to end on, and this is something that we should have probably brought up at the very top of the episode, but I did want to go around and ask what everybody's core teams were that they used throughout the majority of the game. This is something we've been doing on most of these episodes, I believe, and I'm just curious. Chris, I know you said you had kind of two different teams that you used. What was your main group this time around?
I'll list out my champion team. Yeah, like the ones that I actually won with. Let's see. I did the dancing duck.
You did the dancing duck.
Yeah, I did. Clodsire, very reliable boy of mine. Low kicks, the bug who can also. I had a fighting type, fighting Terra type low kicks that was very useful to me. Tinkaton, who I understand looking at like the competitive subreddits is actually not that great, but I still really like Tinkaton. Annihilate, I really enjoyed, and I had a Sco villain because I was just missing both grass and fire, and it's like, what do you know? They have one that's just both of those. So
there you go. Pretty
eclectic team, I think. Again, all new Pokemon because that's how I roll with these games. So
Max, I know your team because we fought. What was your team?
My team was also the Dancing Duck, Quackaville. I don't know. Tinkaton as well. It was new. The Fairy Steel typing pair there was interesting. More leaning into Logan's point of, well, this is an interesting type pairing. Let's put these two together. I will say Tinkaton's hammer is too big because it holds it on the right hand side and it blocks the view of the entire battle with the camera.
I kind of dude, try having Dondozo like I did.
Oh my gosh, you can't even
see how that works with the camera. It just would vanish every time a fight would start for me, and I would have to like rotate the camera out and get like a top down view so it would pop into frame and I could see it.
Yeah. Then I had a Bellabolt, electric frog thing, the Surreledge, the Fire Ghost Mega Man sword Pokemon. I finally got an Appleton because it's much easier to get in this game than it is in Sword and Shield. Disappointed by how small Appleton is. I thought Appleton would be a huge apple dragon, and it is a tiny apple dragon. And then Fargraph, whatever, the new draft evolution that made Logan so angry.
Yeah, that thing sucks. My team was, like I said, I had two starters. So I had Skeleridge and Meowscarada, or whatever it's called. I also had a Bellybolt like Max. I also had a Tinkaton like both of you did. I had a Dondozo, like I mentioned, the giant whale catfish thing. And then I always have to get the pseudo legendary because I'm very uninteresting. So I got the Baxcalibur or Godzilla thing because it looks literally like Godzilla and it behaves like Godzilla. So that one was absolutely in my wheelhouse. Although I will say I hated the dragon ice combo. That makes it so weak. Like ice has
so fragile.
Ice has so many weaknesses, like ground, fighting, fire. Like that thing has so many weaknesses because it is an ice type. So yeah, that felt like again kind of similar to Meowscarada, like a glass cannon that I was trying to use and had to tactfully send out and know when to use it, and know when to keep it in my party. But Tinkaton was the common. I feel like that's one of the most common new Pokemon that everybody's getting. I feel like it's one of the only new fairy types, and then it's one of the better designs with the whole Pokédex too. I think
yeah.
So cool. I think that's we've largely talked about everything, unless there's anything else you guys want to bring up here at the end. But otherwise, let's talk about this game's legacy, which is obviously we're recording this a month out from when it's released. Again, there's no DLC. There's no redemption tour that this game has gotten to go on yet, thanks to future patches or anything like that. So for me, this game's legacy is that it's probably the most broken Pokemon game ever and really did a lot to damage the series and kind of its reputation, but also none of that mattered. We didn't talk too much throughout this discussion about the performance problems with the game or just how poor it ran on Switch, which has been well established by everybody. So I don't feel like it's something we need to talk about a ton, but also I can't separate the fact that this game, not only were there a lot of problems gameplay wise and systemically with the game, but yeah, it's horrible from a performance standpoint, even though they pushed out a couple patches since release.
That's
Not really
since Cyberpunk 2077 have I seen such a outpouring of weird gifs and images and hilarity.
Falling through the middle of the world. I don't know. There's all kinds of weird stuff.
Attack on Titan character models, where they just turn giants in
Yes.
the mounts or something like that.
I remember seeing one, if you just have two controllers connected to the Switch, you can push forward on both of them and you'll go twice as fast. Just your walking speed. Just double it immediately.
That's great.
Yeah, Chris, how do you feel about the game's legacy at this point in time? Again, 6 weeks after launch.
Yes, very hard to tell. I mean, I will say the weird thing is that Scarlet and Violet made me weirdly nostalgic for Sword and Shield, which I never thought
Same.
I would say. I mean, with Dexit and people complaining about, oh, the animations aren't that great and there's pop-up everywhere. I mean, that game looks gorgeous compared to this one. I mean, even though it was such a linear game, like there was kind of this diorama feel of the environments there, and the fact that Scarlet and Violet tries to do the see that mountain, you can go there, and everything just looks very muddled when you get near it. It's just, you know, the magic is gone. And so with that, I'm pretty sure that 2 generations now, that Scarlet and Violet will be considered classics.
Yeah.
Like, depending on just how much they beef it with the next couple generations, you know, assuming they don't get their stuff together. So I will continue to play this just because I am very chore-oriented when it comes to Pokemon games of, you know, collecting and breeding and training and all that stuff and all your IVs and EVs stuff. But in terms of legacy, I don't think it's really going to matter because this game flew off the shelves anyway. So
Yeah.
who are we to say?
Max, what about yourself?
I think Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is like a flawed execution of grand ideas, right? It's open world, multi-path, all these things. But it has this sparse world that does little to entice you as the player to seek your treasure, with, you know, technical performance and padded game design actively fighting you and slowing you down throughout the entire game, really. The challenge is minimal in a campaign that doesn't grow alongside you. It all feels, to quote Nimona, fruitless. Not fruitful, fruitless. Yet there's an undeniable allure still of seeing Pokemon out actually in the open world. I think that novelty hasn't worn off on me yet, at least, considering I guess we've had Let's Go, Sword and Shield, and now Scarlet and Violet, and Pokemon Go as well, kind of merging that with the real world. So there's still that allure that is engaging to some degree. But in a year with 2 open world Pokemon games, it's a shame that the teams couldn't work together to make one true treasure for us all to enjoy. So that's what I think about the game.
They need to pool their resources for the next couple, apparently. Which would be a good idea. Like, I don't know why they don't do that in the first place, but I guess the answer would be money, because why sell one game that'll sell 10 to 15 million copies when you could sell 3 of them?
Yeah.
That will sell that many. So
The fact that they outsourced the Diamond Pearl remakes is just putting this whole operation into question, if you ask me. Like,
Yeah.
what is happening here?
I don't know.
what are they doing with the money they're making, I guess, is what I want to know. Like, usually money brought in like that would allow the resources to improve. Like, even if they were on time crunches, like, you would stand to reason
Where does
that
it
they're
go?
making so yeah, like, stand to reason that, like, because they're making so much money, they could hire so much more talent to work on these games that were, even if the windows of time were smaller, that it just feels like they're really, again, we have no idea what is going on behind the scenes over there, but it just feels like it's such they're they're flying by the seat of their pants, essentially. Like, I don't know.
I think they have 169 employees as of 2022, if Wikipedia is to be believed. Remember they had this odd
That's
period
crazy. I feel like it should be like 500.
Yeah,
169.
right?
Like,
yeah,
it's very strange.
Like nothing. They had this whole, I think it was like in the late 3DS era where they were trying to also do original game. Like, remember Tembo, the badass elephant?
Yes.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Pocket Jockey.
Gigo Record. Little Town Hero.
I do remember that one too.
Yeah. Town
Did
in
Toby
parentheses
Fox do
working
something
title.
for that game?
I believe so,
Yeah. So I don't know how stretched out they are there, and I don't know what else to say because I don't want to say anything that is probably blatantly false or misleading. But
It's something's going on over there. That's for sure.
I will say, despite being one of the biggest franchises on the planet, Pokemon feels pretty faceless to me, and it always kind of has, outside of like Junichi Masuda. Like, he's the only person.
Go Ichinose?
Yeah, like there are a couple key figures tied to Pokemon, but they're the same figures that have been tied to Pokemon for the past 20 to 25 years. Like, there is not, like, I think of other Nintendo teams, and I know Pokemon's not specifically a Nintendo team, but, you know, with Mario, you've got the, I can't remember their names, but I know the new guy. Yeah, I know the new guy who's like, they've put out in front and they've been like, hey, this is the Mario guy. This is the guy who does the snaps on the directs, and he made Odyssey, and hey, here's Aonuma. He runs Zelda. And like, I know these are only single figures, but Nintendo like pushes these people to the front a little bit more. Pokemon is very faceless in a lot of ways. And when they do put a face to the brand, it's usually like, hi, I'm Joe, corporate CEO of Pokemon, and I'm here today to talk to you about Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Like, it just feels very, it feels very corporate in a lot of ways.
not everyone can have a Sakurai or the Splatoon guy with the lab coat and sunglasses.
Yeah. They're like the umbrella corporation of video game developers in some ways.
Oh my gosh.
To combine both of our 2023 seasons together into one
good
metaphor or simile.
Something like that. And I think that does it for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to check out our previous seasons, you can go to chapterselect.com or follow the show at chapterselect. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can learn more by going to chapterselect.com/join. You can follow Logan on Twitter at moreman12 and his writing over at comicbook.com. You can follow myself on Twitter at maxroberts143 and my writing over at maxfrequency.net. You can follow Chris on Twitter at, dang it, what is Compendorizer. They are the managing editor over at GamePer, so go check out their work there. A link to the Scarlet and Violet review that Chris wrote is in the show notes, so check all that out. And until next time, adios.
Hasta la vista.
Hasta la vista. That's what I should have said. Chapter Select is a Max Frequency production. Chapter Select is supported by you. You can gain access to longer episodes and bonus content by going to chapterselect.com/join. This episode was researched, produced, and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 6 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself. Season 6 is all about Pokemon. For more on the season, go to chapterselect.com/season 6. You can follow the show at Chapter Select and check out previous seasons at chapterselect.com.